You're listening to Unbridled with your host, Genevieve and Carly. Welcome to Unbridled.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm your host, Genevieve.
And I'm Carly.
And this is the Unbridled Talk Show, where we explore the incredible world of equestrian sports. And today we're going to be delving into the sport of mounted games with our guest, Kimi Fleming, on our podcast show here. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm super excited to talk with you about the lovely world of games and just all of the amazing people and ponies in it.
Absolutely. So how long, what is your history? I mean, I've known you for a long, long time in mounted games, but not everybody who's coming on the show kind of knows your background. How long have you been riding? How did you get into horses?
Yeah, so I've been riding my entire life. I grew up, my mom, when I was 2 years old, put me on a horse because she was into riding growing up. Her dad was a racehorse trainer and breeder, so she grew up doing pony club eventing, all of the fun stuff. And so when I was born, she was like, "You're gonna ride horses. That's gonna be your thing." And I just fell in love with it. And I'm like, I just really enjoy it too. It's very therapeutic. So growing up, that was like my rhythm. I would go to school, come home, ride my horse. I'm so grateful to be like have my own horses. And that was also part of like kind of the discipline of it. I would have to come home and take care of my horses every day. And that was just my life for like the first 18 years. And then I started out in pony club doing eventing, and just dressage, show jumping, all of the basic, like what everyone kind of starts out with while you're learning equitation. And then I learned about mounted games and got involved through pony club when I was 8 years old. And then about 2 years later in 2010, a family that was in MGAA, the Taylors, they were like, you have to do MGAA. So when I was 10, I started doing mounted games across America. And then from there, kind of just fell in love with it and took off. I've been doing it ever since. I've been in games for, oh gosh, that's a lot of math right there.
I know I was there the other day.
Okay, I'm gonna have to do some mental math real quick. 10 years to 15 years. So I've been doing games for 15 years now. That is like over half of my life. I'm 23 and oh my gosh, I've been coming back into it because I took a couple years off from college and I just forgot how much I love it. It's so much fun.
How long did you take a break through college? Was it was only like 3 years, right?
Years. Yeah, about 3 years. I tried to ride through my first year of college and then COVID happened. And so I was kind of like, okay, I just kind of need to like take a step back. I was still riding at home, but going to competitions just became a lot with school and trying to find a job and COVID. So it was what it was, but I'm happy that I did it because now I can come back to it and still have fun with it.
That's such a good point too. And you find a lot of riders you grow up in this sport and then they get married and they have kids and they kind of stop. But I feel like our sport, more than a lot of others, like eventing or dressage, has such an open point of entry that people come back pretty quickly. Like if you want to do the sport, you can take a couple years off and just jump right back in and everybody's going to be inviting.
No, definitely. And like, it was something that I didn't really think about because I just did it all throughout my life. So I didn't even think about it as like taking a break. It was kind of just like, I'm still doing this. I'm just like watching from afar because it is such a big family. But I think that's one of the most amazing things about it is like you can jump right back into it. I've been scrambling on teams all year and it's been so much fun riding with so many different people because I was on a set team for like so many years that I've kind of forgotten like how much fun it is to just kind of scramble and like figure out the rider dynamics with different people and just kind of be like, okay, you can put me anywhere in any race. Like I'll figure it out because I haven't competed in a couple years.
And it's honestly, I think people who do lock down on that team, you even lock down into a position, like, and you'll be like the last rider who always goes out. And it's really fun when you get put into a position where you have to start flexing and you're like, oh my, there's like so much more I can learn.
That's definitely what I've been doing.
So like reeling it back when you were younger, because you did start so young in like mounted games. And I know when you talk to, I feel like it's dads usually, but like their daughter gets really into horses and they're like, oh, it's a phase. Even my dad was like that when I was young. He's like, it's a phase. Now my poor dad is the one mucking stalls and like, so helpful. But there's so much that being an equestrian does to build character and discipline that you can take on into like your professional life. And so since you started so young, what skills and like lessons do you feel like you learned that you were able to translate that helped you as you became an adult?
Oh, that's such a good question because I think about it and talk about it all the time. It formed me as a human being for the better. I mean, growing up younger, just like discipline, like having a responsibility of taking care of a horse, whether that meant like, I couldn't go see my friends after school or something because I have to go feed the horses, or I'm at a sleepover and I have to wake up at 8 a.m. to go home and feed my horse. Like stuff like that, it is what it is. You kind of just learn that that's part of it, and the people around you understand that horses are your priority. But I think that really helped me growing into as an adult, like whether it's I'm taking care of my cats or I have to take care of my car with something, or I'm going to work every day. And so that like fundamentally formed me. But I think beyond that, communication skills, like I was riding overseas and I talk about it in my job interviews when I was interviewing for a job, like it definitely helped me with my communication skills. I used to be such a quiet kid. If like you've known me for so long, I've definitely grown up and become like so different. But I think that's been incredible, just interacting with so many different people across the world. And it's also like just learning constantly. That's what I love. And so like I'm a journalist, and so meeting people from all across the world when I was 16 definitely was like, I want to learn about all of these different cultures and like talk to these people about their stories. So that kind of helped me form like my viewpoint as like, I love being a storyteller.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, I think also like I took a job, I forget what it was. I took this like little clinic thing about getting a job and like how to, build your resume and all of that stuff. And so I was the person that was running it was so interested in hearing about my horseback riding. And she was like, you're going to learn some really good skills from this. Like you learned how to work well under pressure, how to hit deadlines, because like, you're working in such a fast paced environment. And I was like, wow, that's actually really true, because the way I go about my job, it's so fast paced, and I love it because like my entire life I've been doing this sport that's so adrenaline, like full of adrenaline, and I just like I'm addicted to it. And so I kind of put that into my career.
No, I found that so I was in manufacturing, and now I'm a category manager in supply chain for a defense contractor that builds like ruggedized servers. But I started on the manufacturing side of things. So I was on the floor, always a deadline, and you're like super active. And so many people would get stressed. And for me, it was almost invigorating because you're used to it. And now translating into a corporate environment where you have to step back and it's a little bit more peaceful, but it's all about communication and relationships. And you're right, like on both counts, I feel like there's opportunities to get super stressed out, but we've kind of been conditioned in a really, really good way from a young age to be able to operate like that.
So true.
And so for young riders who are just getting started, who are getting engaged in games, like any advice on things that they can try to take away from their experiences? Like you have a competition, you didn't perform as well as you wanted to. Like what are things that they can look for and be like, hey, that's still a success, like communicating well, doing well with supporting your team, things like that. What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think, well, the ones that you just mentioned, absolutely communicating with your team, just enjoying the weekend, even if it didn't go the way that you planned. Like, you're still, whether you go with your family, you're bonding with your family, you're spending quality time with your horse and your friends. I think that was like the biggest thing for me coming back this year, because I have been so out of practice. It's like, I'm just going to enjoy it. So those are like huge takeaways, that it's obviously so easy to focus on, your mistakes, and when things don't go your right way. I came home from a competition, and on my drive home this one time this year, I just cried for like the first like 30 minutes, because I was just like
Aww.
so focused on two things that went bad instead of the rest of everything that went well. So it's so easy to focus on your mistakes, and if like, you miss a vault, or you drop a handoff, something like that, it can just stick in your mind. And so really focusing on like, this didn't go well for me last competition, but I got it this competition, even if, I missed this other thing. So just small things with that. And like each show you're, working with your horse and trying to improve. And I think that's something also to focus on, like your improvements with your relationship with your horse, and your own skills. I think that is so big, because that's something that I've focused on my entire life for the many ponies I've ridden. Just every competition trying to improve one thing. And so, and just focusing on one thing. So I think that's like the biggest takeaway as a younger rider, and just really trying to have fun with it, because it's such a fun sport. And it's easy to make it like such a big deal, but at the end of the day, we're all a family and we're all doing this for fun.
And it's so true to like think about what went well. And I tell people this when they're bringing up ponies and I'm coaching, but it's like we want to big picture. We're like, oh, we didn't go from being able to trot stuff to gallop it this competition. But it's like if you step back and think about like rehabbing an injury or something, and like let's say you broke your hand, just moving one finger is a huge success. And that's what leads up to being able to use everything again. Like we need to look for those tiny building blocks and then celebrate them as you go. So I remember, thinking back, you on Snickers. It was Snickers, right?
Yes, it was Snickers.
Okay. And Snickers was a powerful little pony. Was she black and white?
I feel like she was a black and white, or like dark brown and white little paint Welsh pony.
How tall?
She was 13.1.
And you were pretty petite then too, I remember.
Yeah, I've always been like on the taller side. Definitely not as tall as you, Jen. But I've always had like a long legs and a long torso. But I loved that. She had the biggest barrel too. She was a thick pony, but I loved her.
She was, yeah. And I just remember we always, like, our first impression of you riding her was how fearless you seemed. Like, honestly, because it's super powerful pony. Pony is like, she was quick too. You had to like bit her up a little bit because she was just like, she was going to go. And you were hitting vaults. You were leaning, like you were just really brave. And I think a lot of riders, struggle with that when they get on a pony that is really powerful and maybe is a step above where they're ready to be. But I think it's something that you can build towards. You don't have to necessarily just give up when it's like that. Do you have any advice for people who are kind of dealing with a pony that maybe is a little much for them right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. That's like the biggest compliment. It's so funny to think back, but I mean, it's not easy. I'm going to say that. Like I said, I cried after a competition this year. I did the same thing when I was, 11 years old, starting out on Snickers, because I was coming off a much slower, like well-made pony club pony named Spud. And he was like just the perfect angel, like 12'2", little Welsh pony. And then I moved up to Snickers, and she's just this like tank that just goes, and you just have to go with it. And like, it was such a learning curve that like, I know you say I made it look so easy. It was like not at all. And it definitely just comes down to like practicing, I think. And something that in my experience, I've kind of learned to realize is that most of those types of horses are going to be different in a competition ring. And those are the types of horses that I gravitate towards. And you can see that in my horse now, Willow. But I think just getting as much practice as you can at home, and also like doing flat work. That is my biggest thing. I don't really practice that much, and I just like getting your equitation right, working with that relationship with your horse, working on transitions, working on, getting their endurance up, doing hills and doing like figures to just get them responsive to you. That has been the biggest thing for me with working with those types of horses. And then in the competition ring, they'll be a lot more responsive. Hopefully, it doesn't always go that way, but I lost my train of thought.
Well, you were mentioning conditioning too, and I know that that's a question that has come up before. Like, what do you do for conditioning your games pony? I feel like there's a lot of emphasis when you're eventing, and there's plans out there. If you even Google articles, there's literally plans. You can just be like, follow this and your pony will be fit for eventing. But in mounted games, I mean, what do we do really to get them ready?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm so lucky that my mom, grew up doing eventing, and my whole family has been in the racehorse business for so long. So we kind of train, like I condition Willow like she's a racehorse. My great aunt is, almost 80 years old, and she's a racehorse trainer still. And
Cool.
so she is always like, you have to do all of these things to get her in shape. You have to make sure she's conditioned, because, your racehorses are going out there just going in a circle. You're going out there and doing all of these really tight turns that are putting a lot of strain on their legs, their tendons. And so what I do is I mainly just like, I don't practice that much. I practice maybe once a week. But most days I just go out and flat her, and I do a combination of hills and figures. I do so many transitions. So really just like a lot of trot work. And then something that I've had to work in the last couple of years, which I've seen like a big improvement with my horse Willow, was doing just canter trot transitions. I used to just do like, the trot halt, but she still would never listen to me on the field, like slowing down. So like when I've introduced those types of things in, I've seen such a big difference in the past couple of years. So that's my biggest thing, is really just, doing a lot of flat work. And then also I get to I have a big open field, so I'll like breeze gallop her every once in a while just to kind of get her lungs cleared out. But that's my biggest thing. I'm getting her fit for this year, because I've been out of it for 3 years. That was kind of the biggest feat for me. So I did like a bunch of hill work to kind of get her hind end stronger and just work on that. So that was big this year for me.
And I think there's a lot of emphasis there on not necessarily riding in an arena all the time. And it also helps because I don't really have an arena. I've got a little pad that kind of has some bluestone, and we use it for when it's raining and nasty or whatnot. But for the most part, we have to ride in fields. And so you do have a lot more opportunity to condition your pony without all the tight turns, which can kind of wear them down. But also you're putting the pony in a position where they're usually a little bit more excited. They're a little bit more antsy. So I feel like you almost get more out of your training session when you do things like transitions, because you're already in more of that atmosphere, like when you're in competition.
Yeah, no, that's what I've been realizing, like riding in such an open field, because growing up, we had an arena at my parents' house. And now that I have her where I'm living now, it's just this big open grass field and we're always fired up. But it actually makes me feel a lot better when I go and work her and she's listening to me and being responsive, because I know she's so much more energetic. And it is a lot more rewarding.
So when you're training, what is the one, the biggest takeaway or thing, if a kid was going to walk away from this show and try to implement it fundamentally, what is the one thing that you feel like would have the biggest impact on just your pony's overall well-being foundationally for games? Everyone's different.
I know everyone's different. I think, like I said, flat work and working on your transitions and working on getting your horse responsive to your leg and your seat, not being as heavy in the hands, because in games it's so easy to do with your pony. And when it's heavy on the forehand and you're or they just grab the bit and run, you're not going to be able to focus on your portion of the races. So fundamentally, in my opinion, that is the biggest thing. And so that's something that I've always focused on when I'm riding a horse, or I'm trying to figure out a horse, is okay, what's the best way to get this horse to be responsive to my seat and leg as opposed to my hands? So I don't know if that's too complicated.
No, that's what I would think too. I mean, it's so fundamental. And it's good to reiterate that that's where we need to be. We don't need to be necessarily out there practicing every day just for games, because it can sour your pony, but you just need to be able to communicate with your pony and have them respect you.
Exactly. And you mentioned not practicing every day because it can sour your pony. I think at least for a lot more seasoned games ponies, I think that's also huge. It's so easy to go out and just okay, I need to practice this for my skill, but at least riding at a higher level, in my experience, for my pony, if I'd go out and do games 3 or 4 days a week, she would absolutely go insane. I don't even think I could ride her after that. So it also is just good for them to mentally take a break sometimes, whether they're being sour or they just love it so much. But when you're doing that constantly, you kind of lose that foundation. And at least with my horse, that's how it is. If I go out and practice for a couple of days, I'll have to really work back into the flat work and be okay, you have to remember how to listen to me.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know a little bit more about your pony. I know her name is Willow, but I don't know anything else about her. Where did she come from? How long have you had her? How long have you been gaming her? What did she do before you got her? Kind of deal.
Yeah, so I've had her since 2016, and she came from a family that used to do games, the Shays, that they have turned out so many great games ponies over the last 20 years. And so Shannon Shay actually started her and was competing her. It's so funny because I have pictures of me on Snickers when I was 12 years old, riding on a team with Shannon and Willow. And all I remember was Willow rearing over all of us, because she liked to be a little airborne, to put it lightly. And so in 2016, Shannon was would you to train Willow, like I would trust you with her and compete her, because I've gotten a lot of ponies from her in the past. And I was like, yes, absolutely. And so she's a little 13 3-hand Welsh thoroughbred cross mini racehorse. That's what we call her.
Yeah.
And so before Shannon started doing games with her, she was actually a hunter pony that was too hot for hunters. And so she's lovely to do flat work on, which is also why like I just enjoy doing it, because she'll go in her little frame like a hunter pony. She'll go with her head on the ground. And then as soon as you start doing games, she's like a completely different horse.
I love that. That's so
She
awesome.
is such a pretty, so people who can't see her, she's this really dark liver chestnut, she looks like a mini thoroughbred, like very leggy, but that pony, her reach when she gallops, I always love watching her because she's so impressive, especially as like a photographer, getting pictures of her because she can just climb through the
Flat
air
out.
to get home. Yeah.
Yeah. I loved your pictures. They're always the best. I miss them.
Thank you so much.
I love you guys are in open, but it's also like, oh, Jen's not taking pictures anymore.
I know. I was telling people that. I'm like, we need heats again so I can at least get half of the competition.
Right?
She is she is powerful. And it's kind of, she reminds me of Kelsey's bay pony
Muffin
that she had.
Yeah.
What was her name?
Muffin.
Muffin. Okay, yeah. She she was from the Shays too, right?
She was from the Shays. She was also a Welsh thoroughbred. Kelsey and I have talked about that a lot, being like, they're so similar. I told Kelsey I was in Kentucky last weekend. You don't have to put this in. I was in Kentucky last weekend, and I told Kelsey, I was like, you can vault her. Like, you're a better vaulter than I am. Like, you can vault her. And Kelsey was like, I think I'm going to die on that thing. But she's like, she's so much like Muffin for the vault.
Yeah. And Muffin, so Carly, Muffin got sold literally overseas. She was imported to Europe to compete.
Yeah. Very cool. When was that? Like what year? So I can visualize this.
I want to say 5 years ago.
Just to guesstimate.
Yeah, maybe? It was a year or so after Worlds, I think. 2016.
Yeah, so it could be 7 years ago.
Yeah.
It was a little ways, but it was really cool. I mean, I think she had taken Muffin over and competed her over there and then ended up selling her, something like that. I'm not sure, but since we're keeping this out.
Yeah.
It's just really cool because you see a lot of ponies we're like, oh, import, but you had such quality in that pony. And it's the same with your pony, really. It's just beautiful and very athletic and determined. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, I love her. I mean, people always say that, and it's just like, she's such a cool horse. She's my like heart horse. I love her so much. She's just so cool.
I feel like she sticks out. Like she's so attractive to look at, and she's just so cool to watch go out there because she's so fast, and then her turns are so great, and then you also handle her so well. You're so calm up there the whole time. I feel like I'd like go crazy and be so scared of her just because she rides so big. And then you have the confidence to do things like vaults and leans, and I guess you don't fear death. But I also was curious on how you maintain that and for vaulting. So I'm a newer vaulter within the last like year or so. I just started. So I'm wondering about confidence. How do you maintain that confidence on a horse that is just like going flat out?
Yeah, it's not easy. And I won't say I entirely have my confidence because, I mean, I think when I was a teenager, I just kind of went for it. Like, I don't think I really cared. You just take a jump and hope for the best is what I kind of always said. But since then, I've had a couple spills because, like, it's just not always going to work out that way. And then also in 2019, I had a really bad fall at one of the MAs that I ended up having to go to the hospital and had a traumatic brain injury because of it. And so since then, my confidence kind of was shot because I was like, I can't fall off. Like, I can't get hurt. And it's scary. And so since then, I've really been trying to build back up my confidence. And so really just taking the time at home, like she also doesn't run like that at home. So it's really hard for me to practice vaulting. And so I've been just trying at home, like cantering around the arena, jumping off, jumping on, jumping off, jumping on, like the pony club drills that we used to do. And so I've been trying to get that back at home. And once I have my confidence back at home, it's really just like, okay, in competition, I just positive self-talk. If you've ridden on a team with me, I almost have an anxiety attack before every vaulting race. But Just really like positive self-talk, like this is how we're going to do it. Just got to think about methodically, like thinking about how to vault is something that I never had to think about before. Really going into the race being like, okay, in sock, we're going to dunk, then we're going to sit up. Where are we going to jump off? You're going to go around me, and I'm going to have to hustle on the ground, like actively think about that, and then actively think about taking a jump, because that's what I did at one of the competitions. I just forgot to jump and missed all of my vaults this year. So that has been the biggest thing for me, if that is helpful at all. Just
It
really
is.
like drilling it and having to think about the mechanics of it. And that's how you get better with like any race, is just thinking about the mechanics of it. Whether, I think Jen mentioned, like moving a finger can be, you know, the means to making something improve. And that's honestly how it is. It's just really thinking about how you're playing each race.
Yeah, and Michelle Riley actually told me early on when I had some anxiety about stuff, she'd be like, before you go out, kind of like what you said, visualize the race, break it down, and visualize what success would look like. And then that way, when you get out there, that anxious energy has now been put into something really productive. And then you're just sort of checklisting it as you go. And I'm not the greatest vaulter. That has been my struggle for years. I'm so earthbound. Like, it's very hard to move me. But it is. So honestly, for me, vaulting though, if they trot all day, I'm fine. It's the motion of a canter or gallop that is so intimidating, I feel like. And I don't know if you ever experienced that, Kimmy, especially when you're coming back, where like as they start to roll into that motion, is there any tips that you might have for people who are just starting to canter vault?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's honestly, the more momentum you have, not going from like a standstill to an all-out gallop, but I think the more momentum you have kind of makes it easier, but you do have to keep up with the horse in order for that to like happen. It's really easy to get left behind. So like that's been my struggle with Willow, is she kind of comes out of the turn at the top and just takes off full force. Like there's absolutely no waiting. But I think as long as your motion is matching the horse's, it honestly is easier. That's how I was with Snickers, because she was just perfect. She would like canter in a nice little circle for me, and as long as I was right there, I could just, swing right up. And so it's really just keeping that momentum, I think, because when you're trotting vaulting, you're just kind of jogging next to the horse, but when they're cantering, they're a lot, like, they feel a lot bigger.
Kind of up.
And
Yeah.
so
Right.
like, you feel like you have to go so much further up, but as long as you're right there at I'm like thinking about it while I'm talking about it. But like, as long as you're right there at their shoulder, like, I don't know, that's kind of been like something that I've also been working on, is just keeping up with the horse. That's something that I've always tried to do, and I've not always been successful at it, but that would be kind of what I would say about that.
Okay. No, and did you ever deal with any of your ponies with them drifting out when you try to learn to vault, or have your ponies been relatively honest about coming home?
I'm trying to think of all the other ponies that I've ridden, because Willow, she also sometimes doesn't go straight. That's something that like coming back, I think she's trying to get into the practice of like just competing again, but that's something that I've had to experience with her. I'm still working on the vaulting with her. But she will normally like take my turn really wide and kind of drift out. And I'm trying to think about the name of my other ponies have done that. I think for the most part, all of my other ponies have kind of gone straight, and I've been lucky about that. But it is something like with Willow that I'm we're finally, I think, like after, so many shows this year, I think we're finally getting back to it. But she's been the only one that has kind of had that tendency sometimes.
And what do you find is helping, or how are you working towards improving it?
I'm also still
It's a hard one.
It's a hard one. I mean, with her, it's really my end turn is the biggest thing with my vaults. That's something that I've been struggling with. So coming out of the turn, when she'll cut me off and then just kind of go in any direction I'm supposed to be there. What I've been doing this year is kind of just pointing her where I want to go, and then like she just kind of runs in any direction. So just praying she goes straight, like pointing her in the right direction. And then the more we've been competing this year, the more she's been going straight. I've just like before, because my end turn, I would come out so crooked, she would just be pointed in, another lane and kind of like have to veer back in.
Mm-hmm. So it's got to be really weird when you go, because you've competed overseas a couple of times now.
Yeah.
And when you go overseas, you have to ride other people's ponies because we can't bring our own ponies. So how do you like assess a pony when you first get on? and adjust your skills to accommodate them. How does that happen?
Riding other ponies is one of my favorite things. It always has been, like, growing up. I was trying to think about it kind of going into this. I was like, wow, how many ponies have I ridden, like, of different people's, both in the US and abroad? And it's probably hundreds.
Yeah.
But it's one of my favorite things. And I think part of it is, like, I love trying to kind of figure out horses. I think, Jen, you're the same way. It's like, it's so much fun to kind of learn a horse. And learn how they go and then kind of like adapt to it. So when I haven't ridden, well, no, I have ridden other horses this year. So when I go overseas, normally you meet like the person that is the owner and kind of talk to them about it, being like, this is like my horse. I show them videos of like, this is me and my horse at home. And they kind of give me some tips and stuff. And then it's really just a matter of figuring out how the horse is responsive to my seat. I'm a big, like, I try to ride with my seat and my legs more than anything. So I'm like, okay, is this horse going to be responsive, or are we going to be more hand heavy? Are we going to, are we going to S turn everything? Are we going to be able to lean? How are we for vaulting? So it's really just like practicing all of those different things to try and figure out the horse and like communicate, how to figure out like the best way to communicate with them.
Yeah. And I think that translates so much into people getting a brand new pony when you're buying or when you're sourcing a pony and trying it, to potentially go into games. Every pony is going to be different. And it's almost like putting together those little pieces. Definitely. I always start with, do you stop? And do you go? And it's shocking how many don't. But it's so cool. So overseas, I haven't really competed. I mean, I've competed in Ireland, but I haven't competed on any like major platforms at all. What is the experience like? I mean, that's so.
I can't wait to hear more about this information. Like, I want to know that experience, going overseas, riding with other teams, like with just socializing, riding different ponies in a different country, new cultures. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so it is one of my favorite things. But like, I love to talk about it. I tell all my coworkers about it. They're like, you are like the coolest person ever. But so a little background for those who don't know me. I started trying out to go overseas with USMGA, the other United States. Why can I not talk right now? United States
Mounted Games Association.
Yes, the United States Mounted Games Association, which is the IMGA affiliate for the United States. And so I started going down there and competing, which was a lovely experience, getting to meet people from like, other parts of the country as opposed to just MGIA. So like, I've loved competing in both of the organizations for my entire like last 10 years. And then my first year I went overseas was in 2016. I was on the under 17 world team that went to Ireland. And that was such an incredible experience. I did do like an individuals when Worlds in 2015 was in the US. The under 17, they had like alongside the team competition, they did an individuals. And so I competed in that. And so that was kind of my first taste of an international, was able to take my own horse. It was in Florida. So the next year I went to Ireland, and that was such an amazing experience. Worlds is just so cool to ride at because there's so many different teams from so many different countries. So you're also meeting all these different people. And a lot of the times, like, they're the same people that kind of like are doing, like, how our sport is kind of a family here. It's the same in all these other countries. So like they all have their own little families that they bring to this one competition. So you have your opening ceremonies where everyone is so jazzed up, doing their country's like chants and everything. And
That's
then
so cool.
we have some practices, and then the sessions start, and it's the same. Like, everyone is just all the supporters are chanting their country's chants, and it's such a cool experience to win a race at Worlds and just hear USA from everyone that was able to come over and support the teams. It's amazing, and it makes me so happy to like talk about and think about, because that's one of the biggest things that I think about when I like think about riding internationally, is just like, you're representing your country, and it's easy to forget that because you're just doing something that you love. And then as Worlds goes on, you have your gala at the end of it where everyone just kind of gets to celebrate that the competition is over, who won, and just it's a really fun time. And so that summer I also was able to stay overseas with the US coach at the time and his family for about 2 months, just competing all around Europe. And that was like, when I think about that summer, that is what like completely changed my life for the better. I think it really just made me come out of my shell and I learned so much about riding, because riding, the level of competition overseas is so much higher. And so that's something I wanted to mention earlier, is riding at a higher level, in my opinion, like, even though you might not be up to par, you will improve, like, just by competing against these people and learning their different skills. And that I came home that summer and I remember going to an MA and like I did, toolbox where you jump off, grab it, vault on, and coming home, I like didn't even try to stop, just put it in the box. I was like, oh, I learned that overseas this summer. My mom still talks about it, but it is just such an incredible experience. And I'm so grateful that I was able to do that, when I was 16, 17, 18, 19, because I really think it changed me as a person and as a rider.
I was going to say, like, it must have been a lot too to put yourself out there initially. I was super shy, and honestly, I probably am still like kind of in my shell, and I fake it to make it half the time. But you were also like that too. You were pretty shy also, but then you pushed yourself out there. I mean, that's a huge, when you're really shy, that feels like a huge risk. And you're right though, it's like life-changing to put yourself out there like that.
Yeah, and it was really awesome because I also I did that with another rider, Bella Pellet, who does games in the US. And so it was kind of the two of us, and she is like the most outgoing person. And so I think that also being like with her that entire summer kind of really brought me out of my shell a little bit more. But being able to experience that with another rider from the US and like form such a friendship about like, living in another country and experiencing all of these different things, that was definitely part of it too.
Yeah, that is so freaking cool.
So I was going to say, how many countries have you competed in since you lived over, where was it? Did you live in Great Britain and then
Did I freeze?
compete at different?
Oh,
Did I
Carly,
freeze?
you froze. Hang on. It's not just you. You're good.
I'm used to being the one with the bad Wi-Fi.
Can you see me?
All right, you're back.
Yes.
If you leave and come back, it like resets it, is what I found. Like not leave, but just hit remove. Hang on. Let me remove you and bring you back in. Like from my screen, and then add you to stage. This happened with Stacy on me. I was like,
she disappeared for a second. We were like, uh-oh.
Oh no, wait. Let me reshuffle you so you're back. Hang on. I'm going to have to remove both of you and add you back. Okay. And back.
Are we good?
Yeah, I can see and hear you.
All right. I added the time for Tommy to remove that. Anyway, my question was, how many different countries have you competed in?
Okay, it's going to take me a second. Well, obviously the US. Never been to Canada. I've really always wanted to go to Canada and compete in Canada. So
anyway, we need to get our trailer. Like we'll rent our big semi and we're going to go up there.
Right?
Let's go. Everybody
I come down to ours. But I've competed in Ireland, Wales, England. I didn't compete in Germany, but I was able to watch the European Championships when it was in Germany, and that was really awesome. I think that might actually, we were just like mainly in England, like doing the UK circuit that summer. So I'm trying to think. I don't think that's it. Yeah, I was supposed to be on the world's team that went to New Zealand in 2017, but I wasn't able to go because of family circumstances. So like that's on my bucket list, is like Australia and New Zealand.
Right. I know that was, so Thomas, my older brother, he got to go to Australia, and that I know was like life-changing for him. He had like such a crazy time.
There's so many stories from Australia.
I know. He went with, sorry, this is a side note, but he went with Robert Taylor, didn't he?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sad I didn't get to go on one of those trips. Everyone said how like lovely they were and fun.
The Taylors are just like such a foundational part of me coming up in mounted games. But I think a lot of us too, they had this boarding facility. For people who don't know, they had a boarding facility, but they had arenas. And then Mackenzie Taylor, who competed in, I want to say like 2012. know if it was that early, but she ended up winning individuals for her age bracket overseas, which is amazing. So incredible games family, but they used to host all of these competitions through the winter. They would do clinics, they had coaching, and he would take people overseas, these teams. And he, if you know, Mr. Taylor has this like really gruff, like deep accent voice. It was always so entertaining to listen to him like announcing at the competitions. But yeah, it was definitely, I think, a cool experience for Tom. So, all right, you go overseas, you get on a pony that someone has handed you. What do you think fundamentally, if somebody is coming into games and aspires to do that someday, what skills would get them the most ready to be able to flex onto a brand new pony in a brand new country? What can they try to build towards if you have like, you know, an 8 or 10-year-old watching that wants to do that someday?
Yeah, I mean, well, starting off, like just starting off games, you know, getting that foundation, being able to do everything at a trot and a canter, like working on your vaults, you know, whether you're a standing vault, corner vault, like just really getting like the basics down. And then, you know, once you're kind of like in it more and, you know, you've had a lot more experience, then you can start like, you know, just being like, hey, like when you're practicing, can we switch ponies with your teammates? I used to do that all the time growing up, and like I say, like I started in pony club, but that's kind of how I like got into riding so many different horses, is like we would just like go to camps and, you know, borrow everyone's horses. And so or in a competition, like, you know, sometimes my teammates will be like, hey, do you want to vault my horse in this race and stuff like that. So really just getting that experience in the US on just riding other people's horses, whether they're made, like it's really great riding other people's made games ponies that have been doing it for years, because you can learn so much from a made games pony. And so like when I was 14, I leased a pony that actually I'm pretty sure came from you guys, Pepper, that had been in games for so long. And like I learned so much from that experience, just riding a horse that, you know, had been doing what was known as Masters, the open division, but back then it was Masters for so long. So I think riding like different made ponies, you can learn so much about, you know, adapting to how these ponies ride and how like their riders handle them. And it's so interesting to me because every, like you said, every pony is different, but everyone rides differently and everyone trains differently. And, you know, you might figure out something that you really like and that you can try to implement in your own, on your own training, on your own horse. So like for me, like voice commands was huge, and that's been fundamental for me. Just so Pepper was voice command. I'm like, that's what I want when I train my next pony. So we taught Willow how to do it.
That's a huge, like, I think our Aaron's family clan. You'll hear Thomas. I love it. He's like, hut, hike to do his turns with his pony. And it's so fun to listen to. But the pony just loves having that audible, like having that communication. And I think a lot of ponies do. So every pony I bring up is definitely like those turns or the slowing down, like giving them that command. It just helps reinforce it, because there's times where you're like, you drop the reins or something catastrophic is happening. It's nice to have like that backup safety line. So
Definitely.
Pepper was definitely, Pepper was so cool. So those who don't know, he was a flea bitten gray Arabian. And I remember going to a horse auction when I was like 16, I think. So it was a really long time ago, and he's pretty up there in age now. But we went to this, it was a slaughter horse auction, and there was this girl that, I kid you not, looked like Taylor Swift. She had the longest, curliest blonde hair, decked out in this show saddle, and went out with him and went into the auction, and he no-sailed. And I was like, okay, so he's probably going to go home. Well, then I went and talked, and there was something went on with the family, but he ended up with a kill buyer. And like seriously, just everything like escalated at this auction. And this is the older days of auctions. It was much more livestock centric. I feel like at that time it was a lot of cattle and sheep and goats. And he ended up at one of those auctions. So anyway, I was there with my mom, and actually I like ran up to the kill buyer who had him and had this stock trailer. And I was like, I'll give you this much money for him. And we ended up being able to buy him and bring him home then.
Somehow my webcam just went off. Hold on, give me a sec. Let me just plug my camera back in.
I just love having her. Her energy is amazing. So
Yes.
all right, I'm
so
going to add her
talk.
back in.
Okay.
Add to stage. Hey.
That was so sweet. I overheard that. That was
Oh,
cute.
there you go. I was like, she's amazing. I was like, Carly, how do we want to like? Is there a place we want to take the conversation? And because Carly's been doing the whole podcast like video
2
thing
years.
for a while now.
2
Yeah,
years.
no, I've been looking up because I know you and Thomas have been doing like the fishing one, right? Yeah, I've
Right.
been seeing you guys post about that. That's so
Right.
cool.
And then like your actual job has you in front of a camera, literally.
100% of the day, I just have a webcam in my face and headphones on.
And
my
she's
gosh.
Yeah.
Your job is
Thanks, Genevieve. I'm a sign language interpreter. I interpret phone calls all day. So I interpret for like job interviews, hospital appointments, business calls, pretty much anything that you would ever make a phone call for, paying bills, whatever. I interpret for it.
it's pretty crazy, some of the stories when you have crazy people calling.
That's
I
so
get
cool.
all kinds of people. Yeah, so it's for American Sign Language. So basically that's the entire country of the US. So I get phone calls from, California all the way, to Maine, to Florida, that whole region. And it's a variety of people that I get to work with on a daily basis, which is a blast. Like just like you said before, like it's fast paced. You have to like be able to keep up with the workflow, and every single call is different. Every single person is different. And you have to like adjust yourself to make sure you meet the need of that caller. So it's super customer service based while, interpreting 2 languages at one time and making the conversation successful.
So having a career that is so fast paced, and I guess I'm kind of reining this into a topic that came up. So this is not on our question list. This is like a little bit on the fly. We can always scrap it if needed, but it's a question that came up to me recently because I'm passionate about it, but about like mental health and balancing things, especially as you get into an adulthood, but finding more and more that kids who in their teens or younger are in school, like learning to have an outlet and how they like balance, the stresses of just growing up. And then we have horseback riding, and so many people don't have a sport like this, but just the feedback that I'm getting, because I post periodically things on like mental health. I think it's super important for some people who deal with like depression, or I have panic attacks and I have in the past, and being able to talk about that freely. But having horses as a professional, when you are working like your 9 to 5, and we've got these fast-paced jobs, like Carly is in front of a camera, like working so hard and being so engaged, like horses in general, having that in your life for me is just, it's everything that I look forward to at the end of the day.
That's so important. And that's something that I've been realizing recently too, because I've grown up with horses, and I took a break from it, and then I graduated college, got a job, and the ball just kept rolling, and I work crazy hours. I work 2:00 in the afternoon to midnight. And it's just, I was like so tired. I was barely sleeping like when I started my job, and I love my job so much, but it just got to be like, what am I, like, I'm not doing anything else besides working. And so that's when I kind of sat down and realized like I need horses in my life, because like that is fundamentally part of my identity. And it was a realization I had to make. I for whatever reason, I just like didn't really think about it. And then the more I've been like taking steps to kind of work that back into my life, whether it's just being able to like go out and ride one day before I go to work, or just going and spending time with my horse, it drastically improves your mental health and like makes you so much happier.
Right.
And that was something I didn't realize because I just started like my adult job, and like it's so hard to balance. So, and I think that's something that like I would love to know what other people do, because that's the thing that I'm struggling with the most, is balancing, an adult job and, coming into adulthood with like wanting to compete and wanting to ride all the time. And it's so hard. And I don't feel like enough people in our sport talk about it, or any sport really, but like I think specifically to our sport, like so many people just look like they have these amazing jobs. There are so many brilliant people in this sport that do incredible things. And it's just like, I look at them, I'm like, they look like they have it all. And I can do it too, but it's draining. And I would love to hear more people talk about it, because it's something that I'm still working on, and just keeping that balance of like, I know this riding is now a priority in my life. How do I work that into my day to day without like, sacrificing sleep or eating
Yeah.
or something else?
No, it's definitely for me too, getting into my role where I feel like there's a lot more of a time sink. It's a little bit higher level strategic stuff and you're more focused down. And for me, I was getting so sucked into the vortex that is adulthood. You have to actually step back and be intentional though, and be like,
Yeah.
what makes me happy? Is this going to be a core part of me going forward? And I've just decided like, I love this. It brings me joy. And it's so separate from the hustle and bustle of the world when you just get into the barn and you're just present, because horses just live like right now. And when you're interacting with them, it kind of like is able to separate you from, okay, all of that may have happened today. And you really have to set that aside, I think, especially if you train horses. Like you had a really bad day and you're just agitated and you walk into the barn. Well, they read you right now. So what are you bringing to the equation like right now? And those realizations for me, I think, have helped me be more conscious, at least, of like how I'm feeling and how I'm showing up for my horse, and not just like day to day, but I started to realize when I was in competition, particularly because my horse Hero is so sensitive. He's just so emotional and he just amplifies anything around him. And so I'd show up in competition and he would just have like legitimate like anxiety attacks and he's just like mental breaks. And I started to realize when I would show up and be a little bit more intentional about what I was projecting, it's like he started to amplify that too. And I think what I started to realize, and I'm still there and I'm certainly not arrived, but like as we get into adulthood, we have to be so intentional with our time and so intentional in making those decisions, because if you're not, it literally like the day
It
just
doesn't
goes
happen.
by. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, is that kind of your experience too, Carly?
Oh, yeah. You definitely have to make it a priority. And I've also learned this recently with my health and making sure I go to the gym. And you do have to pick and choose what you do each day. It's like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym on Tuesday so I can ride on Wednesday because I have, a few select amount of hours each day after I get off work or before I start my shift that you have to pick and choose what you get to do with that time, but being intentional about it and setting a schedule and then having something to look forward to. And then also, like you said, being in the moment is just so important. You can't think, hey, I just got to get a ride in. I've got 20 minutes. I got to get a ride in. Let's make sure he gets warmed up. Okay. And then it's not fun for you or the horse. And you didn't benefit from it at the end of the day because you were just trying to get through those motions. You have to be present.
It's definitely hard, especially when you first are coming out of school and first getting that job. We just start, with being intentional. I think it is so huge. And it really like every age group. And I try to talk to like the team Aftershock that I kind of coach and hold together and bring like newer riders together. But in competition, like you have to be aware of what you're bringing to the equation as far as like how you are as a teammate and supporting people and how you are towards your pony, like we mentioned. But that energy, man, being positive and encouraging. And some riders are really anxious when they get out there and they just naturally are. And knowing that someone on the team is like that, just trying to counter that, be positive, be supportive. And I think it makes you a good team member that way. And one question that we get a lot, and I got this recently from some riders up north who are brand new. They're like, I'm new to games. I love the sport. How can I be a good teammate so that people want to ride with me? So I think that's a really good way to end. Like, what are your thoughts on that, Kimi? How can you bring something good to the equation and find riders to ride with?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing like about being a good teammate is just like being a great person. I think just being so like open and willing. I love riding with literally anyone. And so like that's the experience I've had in like every team I've ridden on. I honestly can't remember a bad teammate I've ever had. Like everyone that I've ridden with, and I've ridden with like hundreds of riders, has been fantastic because everyone is just so open and willing and nice. And when there are disagreements, on the field or off the field, like you can talk about it and like we move on from it because at the end of the day, we're a team and like we all have the same goal and you have to work together. And so that's kind of what I think when like I think about being on a team. I'm just like, I just want to go and have fun with like people I enjoy riding with and riding with new people and taking as much away from your team as you can. You learn something from every single person you ride with. Whether it's something that you not necessarily like didn't like, I don't like taking handoffs this way. You can learn things, whether it's good or bad, from anyone you ride with. And so I think that's the best part about being on a team and about being a best teammate is just like being open, willing, and nice to just ride with anyone and being the best person you can be.
Yeah, that's such a good way of like putting it. And I think on the flip side too, be willing to take criticism because the last thing you want is for people to lie to you and just tell you everything's fine. Like if I'm walking, towards a cliff, I want someone to tell me there's a cliff there. Like so don't make it so that people are afraid to give you positive criticism because it's going to make you better. So look at every interaction. And a lot of people who are brand new to team sports, I think I see this the most because equestrianism usually is kind of a solo thing. But like when you're on a team, any interaction, like you said, just look for the positive and what you can grow from with that. If they have feedback for you, take it and then find a way to implement it or make a decision about it, positive or negative, right? It's so huge to be coachable.
Yeah, and that just made me think like also don't be afraid to ask your teammates or ask anyone in the sport that you look up to if you have like a question for them or you are wondering how to improve a certain skill. Don't be afraid to go and ask them because that has like saved me in so many ways over the years. I've gotten so much good advice and everyone is willing to just, help you grow.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes with like a lot of things in life. That's like just general life advice, but also within games, like everyone is so willing. And if you're like, I see such and such go and do these amazing leans, like I'm going to go ask them how they taught their pony to do this or how they, grew to do this. And so that is huge. And that can be with like your teammates, whether it's you're on the field and you're like, hey, like, how do you put your bottle down because I have been struggling with it. Or just like going up and asking anyone that. I think that is like such a big point.
No, I think that is such good feedback. And you had mentioned this at the very beginning of the show. And I was just like, yes. But you were like, I love learning. And I learned to love learning through playing games all these years. And it's like the thing that we've got to take away, I think, from the activity as a whole. Just try to learn from everything and stay curious. And like you said, just ask questions and dive in and engage with other riders. And there's so many people you look out at the field and you're like, oh, well, they're so good at X, Y, Z. And you feel like it's unapproachable. And I feel this too, because I'm so actually like internally very shy. But put yourself out there because it honestly can change your life with the experiences you can create by just reaching out and getting engaged and asking for advice. So I feel like we're getting close to an hour here, Carly.
Yep.
Did you have anything else that you wanted to cover before we close? Anything that like is near and dear to your heart?
You actually like all the questions I was like thinking about, like what you were gonna ask me. You hit all of them.
I should have given you
guys.
questions.
That was so fun. It's okay. I'm a journalist. I'm used to it.
I think so. I'm just going to ask you for a closing thought because honestly, a lot of the kids who are really engaged right now are brand new to games. I've got a lot of moms that are reaching out and they're like, I want to send this to our 4-H like youth club and get it out to pony clubs where it's young riders. So we'll jump back in. Kimi, in closing, with the young riders that are going to be watching this, what words of advice can they take away from this? Like your closing thoughts.
First of all, I'm so happy that more people are getting interested in games. And I think the platform that you're creating, Carly and Jen, like this is going to help. And I'm so happy you're creating this space for younger riders, to be able to interact with other people in the sport, because like you said, it can be intimidating to just go up to someone and be like, hi, my name is such and such. Like I think you're a great rider. But my advice to younger riders would be to just, if you want to do something in the sport, if you have a goal that you see someone else doing, go for it. I had the same experience. I looked up to Mackenzie Taylor so much when I started games. She's the reason I got into it. And she ended up training with her. Like, that is how I learned how to play games. But I looked at her going overseas and I was like, I want to do that. And I was 14 years old. And 2 years later, I made the world's team. So I think just really setting a goal and like not being afraid to put yourself out there and push yourself. I think that is my biggest advice, is just being able to take the leap, take the chance, ride the excited hot pony, ride in a higher division, try a canter vault if you've only been trotting. Be able to, I guess, dare yourself to go bigger, because that is
yourself, right? Yeah,
exactly. That is probably my biggest advice, because that's been my mantra, and like what I've done and learned through doing games growing up is just like, I've had goals that I've set and I achieved them, and now I'm making new goals, and like it's a constant process. So yeah, loving to grow, loving to learn. Yes.
It's horseback riding, but that's like something that translates into every part of life. So everything that you're learning here, put yourself out there, get engaged, reach out to people. Don't be afraid to take a risk. Don't be afraid to ask big questions. Like, that is honestly just something we can take away and apply to all parts of life, especially as you go from someone who's younger into even being a professional. So I think that's such great advice too. And it always it kind of grounds me and gets me thinking again. I'm like, well, man, where are there opportunities for me to maybe push different things, even with just my horse? So I'm so excited having you on the show, Kimi. Thank you so much for coming on. Like, this has been so exciting. And honestly, I don't feel like I've ever sat down and really talked to you about your experiences. So this platform here too, and just being able to share it with more riders, it's going to be so, so cool. And we definitely need to have you back on in the future as well.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. This has been such a blast. And like, I feel like I don't talk about riding enough in my like day-to-day life because I just work. And so like, this has been such a pleasure because I'm so passionate about it. And like I said, I love what the platform you're creating, and I'm so excited to see where you take it. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I loved your pilot episode, and yeah, I would love to come back on the podcast anytime you'd like to have me.
Thank you so much.
You're listening to Unbridled with your host, Genevieve and Carly. Welcome to Unbridled.